rise for the invocation by Councilman Pelizzi, followed by the flag salute.
Lord, we invite you to preside over this meeting tonight. Even with us having different opinions, give us the unity of spirit. Help us to each listen to each other politely as we each share our own points of view. Help us to work as a unified team to combine our ideas for a great outcome. Help us to work as a whole rather than individuals. May we have a spirit of camaraderie in this room and work together on our shared and fruitful mission. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 3, approval of city council meeting minutes dated November 3rd and November 28th, 2022. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions related to the minutes? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelizzi,
Yes.
Mr. Viter,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Item 4, limited courtesy of the floor. We've had no requests tonight. We'll move to item 5, appointments. We will start with our zoning hearing board. We have 2 individuals proposed to fill 2 vacancies that just occurred on our zoning hearing board. Richard Carlson on Campbell Street and Scott Cawley on Woodland Ave. And I will call for a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Motion in a second. Gary Narr, good evening, sir, and welcome.
Long-time zoning hearing board member Mary Bowling, over 25 years stepping down, so that vacancy is there. The other vacancy we have is Canadero, who has been outside of the city. On his own, so we have 2 vacancies. I have presented to you for 2 individuals just named. You have a copy of the files. Both of them have a background that would be very helpful for the city within the zoning hearing board. And
Oops, I'm sorry. And so in any way, but basically these 2 individuals would make a very good complement to us. They are aware that they would be required to attend the planning and zoning training offered by the county, which is done every other year, and they are willing to attend that at this time. And I can answer any questions, and I believe one of them is present via Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Narr. I believe these 2 candidates were interviewed in the finance committee meeting. Ms. Mealy, the chair, is not here yet. Between Councilman Biter, Councilman Allison, and here's Ms. Mealy as well. Perfect timing. You know, if there's any insight into the conversation from finance, that would be welcome. Zoning hearing board interview.
Absolutely. I think effectively the conversation, and thank you to whoever moved my mic so close that everybody will be able to hear me no matter what. And, anyway, the majority of the conversation actually centered around we have 2, frankly, apparently excellent candidates. Gentlemen with time in their schedules now, both are retired. One is a relatively new transplant to the city. The other has lived here for quite a while. They both have some background. One has more. Mr. Carlson has more background in the subject matter, I suppose, and a little bit more experience. But Mr. Cawley also seemed as though he would acquit himself quite well on the board. As I said, they both were well aware of the time commitment, the time commitment, especially to the sort of learning element of the zoning hearing board role. And with the conversation, very interesting, nice to make both of their acquaintance, albeit remotely. And I personally would have absolutely no qualms recommending both of them for the zoning hearing board.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Other members of the Finance Committee, if there's anything to add, you're more than welcome, certainly. And if there's any questions or comments from other members of council, I think Mr. Cawley is on Zoom as well, if anybody has any questions. So,
They're well qualified, and we know the importance of the zoning hearing board. It's foundational to development and everything that goes with it, and keeping things orderly within the city. So, yeah, they fit the bill very well, both gentlemen.
excellent. Mr. Cawley, anything you care to add before we take a vote? Is he on? I thought that he was.
I am on. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Welcome this
Okay.
evening.
Good evening, members of council. I just wanted to take just a brief moment and thank the Finance Committee and members of council for the consideration of this appointment. I look very much forward to working with the other members of the board as we go. So I just wanted to give a brief thank you for this consideration.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you for stepping up and serving the city. We're very thankful for that also. Okay, no questions on the zoning hearing board appointments. Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi, Mr. Viter,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz. Yes. Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. We have a Board of Health appointment also, Maureen DeSoniers of West Third Street, a 5-year term, commencing December 2022, ending January 6, 2027. Is there a motion and a second?
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Allison is sponsoring this, and I know this was reviewed in the Finance Committee, so I'll turn it over to, yeah, sorry, I couldn't make finance, so. I thought you were- my apologies.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Actually, Council Chairwoman Mealy did cover this, but I think she knows personally this individual. And we all saw her resume, and she's qualified 4 or 5 times over. And this is the Board of Health is an important function that we need within the city. I think we've learned that through the pandemic and things like that. We need to have a functioning, cutting edge Board of Health. And this is a good start on that.
Here, here. I don't know if Ms. DeSoniers is here or online. Okay.
No, she's not.
Okay, and that's okay. I would agree. She's extremely qualified. I would commend our city clerk, Janice Frank. She, I think, really helped to kind of steer her to the right place where her service would be most effective or useful, or however you want to term that. So she would be a really good fit there. And our city clerk really helped with that. So thank you, Janice, very much for that, for your work there. No other comments or questions? We'll take a vote. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Viter,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz. Yes. Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. We're going to jump down to the bottom here for a little bit. We have a few guests for a couple. 15, Mrs. Frank.
No, I don't read them. You need a motion.
So we have a subdivision and land development for the Newberry Sub Shop. Is there a motion and a second?
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Welcome back, Harry.
Yes, good evening. What we present to you tonight is a request from West Branch Federal Credit Union and Newberry Sub Shop. The plan proposes a subdivision as well as a land development. The first part would be the subdivision, would be lot number 1. It's going to contain 1.4 undeveloped acres, which contains the whole total parcel is 6.448. So Lot number 1 would be subdivided and it would be 1.47 with the residual keeping West Branch Federal Credit Union intact. It does serve both public water and sewer and does have access off of High Street. So that would be the subdivision part of it. As far as the land development part, lot number 1, they're requesting to build obviously the Newberry sub shop. It would be approximately 3,200 square foot building with an additional area for covered parking, for covered patio for seating and off-street parking for 24 standing parking spaces as well as for 2 handicap spaces. It was reviewed by both John Sanders as well as the Williamsport Stormwater Authority for the stormwater, and it does comply with all of those areas. It was also reviewed by Planning Commission. The Planning Commission gave a positive recommendation as well. Lycoming County Planning reviewed it September 30th, and you do have the comments in front of you. What I can tell you is the plans you have in front of you are already all amended and meet whatever Lycoming County Planning has down there. So you do have the correct and new updated plans. I do have a copy of what they call the will serve letter from Williamsport Sewer and Water Authority. In addition, PennDOT has determined that a highway occupancy permit is not required either for a new one or a modification of one. I do have obviously a maintenance agreement and an easement agreement for West Branch Valley and Newberry Sub Shop that will not be enacted upon until the land development has been approved and the subdivision approved as well. But I do have all those documents that the county had noticed. At this point, to have a representative here and I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nar. Are there any comments or questions from members of council? Mrs. Katz?
Yes, who's the representative? Newberry Sub-Shop has been a mainstay in the city for I don't know how many decades. And I'm happy to see you're extending it. And I think it's such a great asset to Newberry. Okay.
Yeah, Dawn Flexer is the owner of Newberry Sub Shop. I have been working with her for the last year and a half because she's wanted to stay within the city, but she's wanted to expand and find the right area. So it's been a long time process that both her and I have been going through.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions from members of council? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. We'll move to item 16, a subdivision at 701 First Street. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Mr. Nar.
Yes, what you have is a request from 701 West First Street LLC. The plan is to subdivide Lot A, which would contain 17,566 square feet and a commercial building with public water, sewer services. And the other 2 parcels would be parcel number 3 and parcel number 2. Those 2 parcels would be added for one and would be sold in the future for one. What it's designed to do is obviously, because it's such a large parcel and they don't use the whole facility, they're looking at basically bringing this down into one smaller lot in case if they decide to sell it or develop the other parcels. So that's why they're going through this process. It was reviewed by Planning Commission and passed with a positive recommendation. And it also went through the Planning Commission for the county October 11th, and you do have their comments in front.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nar. Are there any comments or questions from members of council? Okay, Mr. Bider.
The only comment that I'll make is that it's very timely because this is right behind the Main Street development that we'll be talking about later this evening. So it's good to see that a lot more activity is going to start to happen there.
Agreed completely. Okay, hearing and seeing no other comments, Mrs. Frank will need motion for item 16, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. We will move to item 18, a certificate of appropriateness for outdoor seating for 10 East Third Street. Mr. Nar.
Yes, what we present to you is the American Legion Post 1 at 10 East Third Street is requesting outdoor seating. You do have a sketch drawing of the proposed outdoor seating, as well as you do have images of the design of the seating that they are requesting. It is within the public right of way. It does have, obviously, it's a large area that does have handicap accessibility to that parcel. One of the main reasons why they are requesting it, obviously, like everyone else, is to establish the outdoor seating within the downtown area. In addition, obviously, this would allow them to apply through PLCB for an extension of the premises for that outdoor seating. It did go through planning, and planning passed it with a positive recommendation for the front of the building. And I do have a representative here.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nar. Are there any comments or questions from any members of council? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. We'll move to item 19, certificate of appropriateness for 425 Market Street. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Nar.
What we have is a request from 425 Market Street. They currently have an awning outside. They are requesting to extend that awning a little bit bigger, as well as change the color of that. Because it's within the central business district, it is required to go before council. You do have images of the present, which would be the small green awning, as well as a proposed little bit larger awning, which still does meet zoning. And that would be a gray, which would stay within harmony of the downtown neutral colors. I do have a representative here as well and can answer any questions. Planning Commission did review that and they passed it with a positive recommendation as well.
Thank you, Mr. Nar. Are there any comments or questions from members of council on this item? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Gary, thank you. We'll hold off on the other item
Thank you.
until the individual's here. So just flag me once we get out of the next couple of items. Okay, we will jump back up to item 6, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance, transfer ordinance number 4. I'm
Is-
sorry, ARPA.
Is there a motion in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion in a second. Mayor Slaughter, welcome to you, sir.
Good evening, President Yoder, Vice President Katz, members of council, and administration. What you have before you is the second reading of the ARPA transfer for the Maynard Street Commons. This was discussed last week on first reading, or a few weeks ago on first reading, and now it comes to you on first read or second reading this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. So we handled this first reading with the request from the developer. There are a couple of housekeeping items that we will, that I'll make some motions to, for a couple of items that we have either voted on previously or have openly discussed in the past couple of weeks. And I'm gonna try to match what you proposed, Mayor Slaughter. If I am wrong, just say something. So the first motion that I would make to amend would be taking $156,150 COVID-related expenses and moving down to create a new line item for police vehicles. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion is second. So this is an item that was voted on about a month ago, I think. It is not budgeted, so I think that's where the mayor was proposing to take that. Any questions or comments? Okay, Mrs. Frank on the motion to amend, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend 7-0, and then Derek, you were taking the pool filter from Public Works Future Projects, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I'll make an amendment to transfer $270,000 from the Public Works Future Projects Reserved budget and move to the a new line item under that category for pool filter replacement. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any questions or comments related to that change? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion to amend.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi.
Yes.
Mr. Bider.
Yes.
Ms. Mealy.
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend passes 7-0. There are a couple other amendments that I think a majority of council also wants to make. Related to both, I think, budget as well as another idea that's been floating out there. So I'll make these amendments, and I think most are in agreement on these, but if not, we can certainly, I can rescind the motions or we can vote them down either way. So the next motion I will make is to remove $1 million from the Land Bank Authority and create a new line item in economic development for a small business revolving loan program. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. So there's been some ideas thrown around recently about creating a small business revolving loan program to try to help, I think, drive some new growth, specifically in downtown Williamsport. I personally love this idea. I think we can work out the details, but I've had some brief conversations with our ARPA consultant. They have done this in other municipalities. They've got a model to do this. This should be, I don't want to say pretty straightforward, but we've got stuff to work off of. So are there any questions or comments related to that? Ms. Mealy.
I think that this, at least is the beginning of one of the most important things that we can do with American Rescue Plan Act funding. If we're not putting it into economic development directly ourselves, I think offering the opportunity to creating a fund that will allow small businesses especially to flourish and to benefit from these funds in the city will be a huge benefit, and especially a fund that is self-replenishing. That is to say, over the course of the next several years, that money will come back to the city. It can be once again lent out to a small business for the sort of money that you might need to purchase the equipment to start your business. I think that's huge, and I look forward to working on the program.
Yeah, I would second that. And a couple of specifics, speaking to the sustainability of that, and talking with our consultant, we get this loaned out, and once it comes back after 2026, it is free and clear. Meaning, we're not going to lose that if we get that money back and it's unrestricted at that point. And I don't think we should really pull that money after the fact, but this is a way to certainly create a sustainable fund, and within the guidelines that are offered. So I'm excited about this also. I would commend Ms. Mealy. This was a combination of her idea and also Mr. Pelisi. I know both of them have been in my ear a little bit or a lot, the past number of weeks. And so, it's always a crucial work through ideas when we have good support for them. So thank you both very much for that. Any other comments or questions? Okay, motion to amend. Let's take the vote. Mrs. Frank.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi.
Yes.
Mr. Bider.
Yes.
Ms. Mealy.
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Give me 20 seconds. I need to do some quick math for the next two. Okay, I'm going to make two more here. The first motion that I will make, I'm going to motion to move $1,801,100 from the levy and transfer that to the lost revenue line item. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. So the thought process here is taking this funding, moving it through lost revenue and creating a reserve fund for the purpose of ensuring we have this funding after we get beyond the 2024 allocation period and the 2026 allocation period. Both of those projects are moving, but I don't know if we will have any firm, level of detail by the time that this money needs to be allocated. And I think this is a way to get some of this money allocated and reserved and that ensure we don't lose that for those projects. And I think in talking to other council members to work through getting this money allocated and spent, that is a idea that I think many were open and open to and aboard with. So I think I had a second. Any questions or comments related to that motion? Ms. Mealy?
I think just to further flesh out, one thing that you didn't flesh out, and the city can, without having to provide any sort of documentation, utilize $10 million of the ARPA allocation for lost revenue. We've utilized a little better than 6 of it already within the city's budget. This would simply, we had earmarked this funding, and I believe your next motion out of Graffius Run toward those specific projects in the city. However, the fear is that those projects will not move fast enough to allow us to keep that funding as allocated. So we are moving them into a fund within the city. They serve then as they fall into the lost revenue clause, but that money continues to be reserved for the uses for which it was originally committed.
Yes, that is correct. We can take up to $10 million off the top for lost revenue. We have, by my math, off of Tracy's updated ARPA budget, $3,602,199 left of lost revenue that we could take. And so dividing that by 2, we get 2 numbers that are off by $1. So that is correct. That's the rationale. Any other comments or questions related to this motion? You have a question, Tracy? Go ahead.
Even in lost revenue, there are 3 things that you're not permitted to do with ARPA funds, and one of them is put them in a sustainability reserve.
Okay.
So the motion might be to use it as lost revenue to supplement the future budget, and then the budget would flush out, and the budget that would have been used for that is flushed out, and that is used to put in a sustainability reserve. I just want you to be really careful in wording.
Understood. Thank you. So I will amend my motion to put this for expenses into the general fund. Is there a second to the amendment of my amendment?
Second.
Motion is second. Mrs. Franklin, the motion to amend my amendment.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
is that a yes?
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider.
Yes.
That was a world weary, yes.
Okay. Ms. Mealy.
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes. Motion to amend an amendment passes 7-0. Back to the main amendment. Any other comments or questions? Mrs. Franklin, the motion to amend.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend passes 7-0. And then I will make one more. I will motion to transfer $1,801,099 from Graffius Run into the lost revenue category for general fund usage. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. As Ms. Mealy had said, with the lost revenue ability, the whole rationale here applies. Again, the goal is not to use this for anything aside from these 2 projects. This is simply a way for us to ensure that we are able to keep it, have something there in case something comes up with these projects and we need to make some moves when we get into crunch time. So we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? All right, Mrs. Franklin, the motion to amend.
Mr. Allison,
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend passes 7-0. Those were the other amendments that I knew about. Are there other that I know about other council members would like to make? Okay. Yeah, I'll fully admit this, you know, I've been very reluctant to spend this money. I've been very concerned about, how we would spend this money. But we've gotten to a point where I think we've come to some consensus. And we're getting some projects moving, which is great. When I look through all the changes that we've made and what we have now, I see a lot of buckets that are either filled of projects that we know are going to happen. In my mind, there's very little left that we have to spend. There's some money with reserve for public works, there's some reserve money for recreation projects. Outside of that, there's really not much in my mind left to move around. I think we want to see this money get put into the proper accounts and get it finally allocated, and get these moving, right? So I can't speak for other council members, but I think that we are in a really good spot with this ARPA budget and our ARPA allocations. I'm excited to see some work with the Land Bank and Redevelopment Authority get moving. I'm looking forward to the other recreation projects that the mayor may have in mind. We've agreed that there's a handful of projects there. Let's get it going. Any other comments or questions related to the ARPA budget before we vote on the final reading? Ms. Mealy.
Just that as discussed in last week's special meeting, or was it 2 weeks ago? I got it pinned forever. Anyway, while I support all the amendments that that we have just made to the ARPA ordinance, I unfortunately do not support the level of funding that we initially created this ordinance to commit to a project on Maynard Street. While I would have been comfortable with a commitment, I'm not comfortable with the $1,050,000 commitment that we're making. Consequently, I will be voting no on the ordinance as a whole. But I do support the other items that you put in, Madam. Thanks.
I think I, of all people, can fully support a protest vote
Well,
and understand. So point well taken and understood. And thank you for your support of the amendments. Any other comments or questions? All right, hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the main motion.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
no.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-1. Okay, let's move into our most fun items here of the night. Item 7, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance adopting various operating budgets for the Williamsport Fund, Capital Fund, Projects Fund, City Hall Operating Fund, Liquid Fuels Fund, Debt Service Fund, Act 13 Fund, and Pool Repair Fund. The first reading.
Give me 1 second. Norm, if I wanted to do another item really quick before this, if I don't get a motion or a second, I can jump and then go back. Is there a motion in a second?
So move.
No.
Second.
All right, you want to go?
What are you doing?
Somebody showed up for the last demo, and I just caught it after it was being introduced, sorry.
Oh, I thought you were asking.
No, yeah,
I withdraw,
sorry.
I withdraw the second.
I withdraw the motion.
Can they do that? Okay, you withdraw the motion. All right. Let's real quick jump to item 17, demolition for 339 Washington Boulevard. My apologies for that. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Motion and a second, Mr. Nar. Thank you for catching me. I appreciate that.
I appreciate it, and I'm sure Mr. Stopper appreciates it as well. What we have is a request from Mr. Ben Stopper for the property located at 339 Washington Boulevard. He is requesting to demolish the Stroman building only, the Benji's part of the building, and the back part of the fitness center will remain. I did walk through the facility with Barry Isaac Associate, who is our professional services for BCO and building and codes. So we all walked through it. Over the last, has not been any use in that building. Mr. Stopper is requesting to tear the building down. Again, it would be just merely the Stroman's building. It would not be the Benji's building. He has brought an engineer in. We have reviewed the engineering plans, and Barry Isett and Associate is okay with basically how the structure is going to be brought down. And providing that council does approve this, we will move forward with issuing a demolition permit for the Stroman's building only.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nar. Are there any comments or questions related to this item from members of council? Ms. Mealy?
It's a shame what's happening in that block of Washington Boulevard. This building has really been a cornerstone of Washington Boulevard and really set the street line up there. It's an attractive building, well built. And I am truly sorry to see it go. This is apparently my night for protest votes here.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Are there any other comments or questions from members of council? Mr. Biter?
The curiosity question that I have, if Mr. Stopper would be willing to share if he has any future plan when the building is torn down.
Any other comments or questions? I'm hopeful we can see something go on there. I think we need more development in the city. You know, if you would sit through the next couple of items, you're going to hear some discussion on some pretty big issues that we're under financially, but it's not just us, it's other third-class cities. The deck is stacked against us, unfortunately. We need development. So I hope that by doing this, we can work together to make that into something mutually beneficial. I really hope that we can, and I would welcome that conversation. I'm confident Mayor Slaughter would welcome that as well. Whatever we can do to make that happen, we would love to do that if we can. So, any other comments or questions? Mrs. Katz?
Mr. Stopper, what's the not square footage, but how much land is available once that's torn down? It's an acre. So there's a lot that really could be put on that property then for an acre. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Mr. Allison?
Yeah, just regarding that, I think what Mr. Stopper has done, excuse me, with the property on East 3rd Street, that building that was the former Mazda dealership, the front of that looks very nice, and it's improvement, and that part of the corridor is in the gateway development, and these are the kinds of things that are going to help us down the road. So I just want to thank him for that, and I'm sure if the appropriate opportunity comes along, he'll be glad to help the city on that. So thanks.
Here, here. Thank you, Mr. Allison. Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
No.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-1. All right, we will move back up to item 17. Janice, you don't need to read it again. You've read it for the record once. Is there a motion in a second?
Second.
Introduction or commentary you'd like to offer for first reading?
We're moving up to item 7.
Yes, 7. What did I say? 17, sorry, 7.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you, Mr. Pelisi.
You're welcome.
Yes, good evening again, President Yoder, Vice President Katz, members of council administration. What you have before you is the ordinance in first reading, adopting various operating budgets for the city of Williamsport. I don't have any introductory at this point. We can just hop right into it.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Here we are. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Sorry. So we've had a couple of budget work sessions, as we always do, to questions, understand what's in front of us. We've had some time, I think, to digest the information that was presented to us, to, I think, talk to each other and ask each other what we like, what we don't like. I think there's a number of changes that a majority of us support and will probably be making. There's a couple of good things with this budget, actually. You know, I'm glad to see that we are funding the capital projects fund, whether I like or dislike any of the projects. To see strategy, I think we've been saying that for a couple of years that we need to actually start, and I commend the administration on I think message and doing that. That's good to see. There's, you know, some consistent things that I think that we've been talking about for the past couple of years that we are still seeing. We are running a deficit of about $4 million this year. I think probably realistically, out taking one-time expenses out, it's probably a 3-ish, somewhere 3 to 4. We see again, we don't have enough revenue to meet our expenses and needs. And, you know, we are kind of going about this from our approach to offering services, I think, in a fairly consistent way that we have been for a while. And so we don't see too much different, I think, than we have in maybe prior years, but especially, you know, pre this group of officials years as well. So let's see what we want to do. I will open the floor for anybody that has any potential changes or amendments they would like to make. Mrs. Katz.
Yes, one of the changes that I would like to see, maybe even a discussion, and Gary, please don't have a heart attack over this, but we feel that Gary Narr is doing double duty here, and a majority of us really feel that he should be compensated with an increase in his salary. I don't know where, how much, but this is what, you know, we talked about this, analyzed it, and we know what Gary has been doing. I don't know what the rest of council feels with this, but his salary right now is proposed for $61,808. I think it should go at least 10,000 more for all the work he's doing. I mean, it's double duty that he really is doing there.
Mrs. Katz, we have a, so for the record, we have pull the number up here, a budgeted, the ordinance reflects this budget, Tracy, that is printed out on our desk, or is it the one that you submitted for the work sessions? So which budget does the ordinance reflect? Is it this one right here? Okay, all right.
The new one?
Yep, so according to that, we have an ending balance of $797,000 roughly. So, I mean, Mrs. Katz, I think with some of the changes that we'll probably make, I think that we'll have a net probably reduction, but, so I don't know that this is probably bad to say, but I don't know that worrying about where we're gonna pull it is probably something we necessarily need to worry about. But I would say if you think that that's the adequate amount, I would make the motion, and I would say you make the motion, and we have a discussion on it. We can amend the motion if we need to.
Make a motion to increase the zoning officer's salary from $61,808 to $71,808.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? Mrs. Katz, for the record, I agree. You know, I think that if the strategy is to structure the department, that makes sense and is fair. You know, we've had two different roles for, I think, a long time. And, you know, in consolidating the roles, you know, the work just doesn't go away. I know that we have Barry Isett, the mayor has brought forward with contract contracted with that is handling part of that. I think that Barry Ice handling, 80 or 90% of that work. So I think that's a fair starting point and a fair move. So.
And no, I know I didn't discuss this with you, Gary. I don't think anybody else has either. So, but
No.
what's something that we just felt was a just thing to do.
Yep. Ms. Mealy.
I would make two suggestions. One real quick, Derek, just to be clear, the salary for this position is such that this doesn't receive overtime, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And then secondarily, it would strike me maybe as being most appropriate for us to toss it to the administration, ask them what they think it should be, and come back next time to make an amendment to budget in second reading. But I'm happy to do either, but
I would.
I think the setting of salaries is primarily an administrative thing, and so it would strike me that it should go to the administration.
I understand. I would prefer, if we're going to raise it, I would prefer to do that tonight because we're going to be only to 5 in next week. And so,
We need 5 to raise.
yes, correct. So I would, if we can, I would prefer to do that tonight.
Can
So
we
if,
table the amendment for a moment, perhaps, the administration consider, or?
I mean, we can
That's up to
table
you
it, come
guys.
back to it if you would like to, and let them consider it.
I suppose that's up to them, but.
That is up
sorry,
to
guys.
the administration.
I think I would need more than a few minutes, but,
Yeah.
haven't talked about it, so, it'd be,
Mr. Allison. Sorry, I didn't meet you off.
no, that's
Apologies.
fine.
I thought you
Go
were
ahead.
done.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, we haven't talked about this part, but when we raise salary, it also raises social security. and
Understood.
dependent, Other line items, so
Understood.
we need that crunched as well.
Yep, understood.
Mayor, I mean, we haven't really saw reports of what's going on with the codes department. And it's sort of like it's outsourced with Gary overseeing it. And sometimes I worry about that. I really do.
No, I think that's going well. I mean, I don't want to speak to you right here, but I think that it's going well, and it's going well with Barry Iset. I think Gary and Matt work well together from Barry Iset and Associates. And obviously, there's always work for all of us to do, but I think that partnership is working out well. And I think we are seeing definitely some positive changes in the codes department. We've had a few hiccups here and there, unrelated to Gary, but I think it's going well overall.
Are they keeping up with the rental properties, and are they keeping up with permits and all of those?
Yeah, I think we're
items.
well within the 10 days, I believe, Gary, is that what it is? Again, yeah, everything from what we're seeing when the new development or whatever comes in, the plan reviews, and Gary's reviewing it from the zoning side, John Sander, if he needs to review anything, and then Barry Iset reviewing. So yeah, I think that's all going well. We're getting certificate of occupancies out, getting inspections done. And so, I think that piece of it's going well. Again, yeah, so yes, I think that relationship is working out well, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any comments or other questions from council? Any added perspective from the administration? Again, if you like, we can table it and save it for a little bit later, but to your point, I think you would probably want to digest that longer than that. So I understand and respect that also. Mr. Mackey.
I mean, I agree with your sentiment here. I do feel like Gary is definitely harder than he has or was 6 months ago. Not that he wasn't working hard 6 months. That's not what I mean. It's a hardworking guy. But I would agree maybe with Councilwoman Mealy that regardless of the fact that there's only going to be 5 council members here next week, I feel like this is something that should probably be digested over the course of a week and voted on next week. That's my opinion.
John, can I hear that again? Did you say that you agreed with me on something?
Yeah,
This has never happened before. I would just like the record to reflect.
It might not be the first time tonight.
That's why I'm backing up here.
Oh,
It's the first time I could actually hear you to agree with you.
all right, whoever the jerk was who taped this mic needs to get over here right now.
And again, that's not to say I don't want to see this pass, because I will. the administration is hearing what we're saying and would consider, so I do think like that, for something like this, to give them a little more time to digest it. So.
Council agree? Okay. Okay, no, you just rescind your motion. Yep. Okay, so Mrs. Katz rescind the motion. So we can certainly revisit that next week. I'll look forward to revisiting that next week. I would respectfully ask the administration, please take that into consideration, and we look forward to your feedback. Thank you very much. Any other motions?
Yes, I have another one, and
Okay.
this is strictly for council here. Our city clerk, I would like to see her salary raised from 41,000 to 200 to $43,000. When you take into consideration everything that our city clerk does, not only does she do everything for us on council, but she also helps all the other departments. Her right to knows that come in. I think I can't even keep count of what all the right to knows that she gets all the time. And but like I just said, she does work and help other offices in the city, and it's only fair that she gets a small bump up in a raise.
So we have a
So I
motion.
make a motion to take the city clerk's salary from 41,200 to 43,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. I would echo those sentiments. I knew kind of what Janice did. I really know what Janice does now for this year, and it's pretty eye-opening. And the other thing I would add, I've probably gotten 2 or 3 dozen phone calls this year from constituents that, they're all good. Just thanking and commending how good of a job she does at directing them to where they need to go. When they hit a brick wall with various departments, and trying to get answers or direction, she's always there to help. And when I say 2 or 3 dozen, I mean that. I can show you the call log probably to prove it. So she does a really good job. We're lucky to have her, and this is an easy one to support. So thank you for making that motion. A second. Ms. Mealy.
I will support this. I don't, I would support the motion, Bonnie. I would agree that Janice really does a yeoman's job down in the city clerk's office, and heck, she just got us a new member on the Board of Health. But all of that said, I will echo the comments that I made last year when I also supported a number of raises that various employees in the city were receiving, and I at the time did not think that that was done in a completely above board fashion either. I believe that we need in the city a transparent mechanism by which people can achieve a pay increase. We need policies for how that happens. We need employee evaluations, and that I don't care who it is. And Janice, once again, this is not about your performance. It's not about anybody's. We don't operate like a private business. We have to have reasons for giving our employees raises, and all employees have to know what those reasons are and what they can do to achieve that sort of increase as well. I understand with our new software, the new software that we will hopefully be approving here later on today, that will become a much simpler and more transparent process. But I cannot emphasize the extent to which I believe that is absolutely essential for us as a city, and for creating a working atmosphere in which employees feel comfortable striving and trying to improve the quality of the output that they're producing. And so, as I said, well, I'll be happy to support this. I really think we need to figure out what the policy and procedure for merit-based increases is, and we need to stick to it from here. Okay.
Excuse me. I would agree with that. I mean, and here's a prime example. We referenced last year, Ms. Mealy, a number of people got raises that were pretty new with the city as well. And I'm not going to argue that they, weren't without merit. When you look at where the labor market was last year, where it is this year, we've got another member of the administration getting a pretty good pay raise this year as well. Same application, right? And we just openly talked about looking at getting another pay raise for a longstanding employee that doesn't have, that did not get one proposed. So I completely agree with that. I would urge the administration to work through that in whatever way, shape, or form they need to do. That it's fair, it's straightforward. Frankly, I think will help make that process better. I think it will improve organizational culture. I think it eliminates any type of dissension between employees that feel they may or may not have, gotten overlooked. And I don't think any of us want that at all. I don't think anybody's trying to do that, but this keeps us from doing that. So I would absolutely love to see that. Any other comments or questions, Mrs. Katz?
Yes, I agree with Liz Mealy. It's evaluations, I think, are very important. And even though this is a government agency that we're dealing with, it's still important to the employees that are working for us to realize and know where they're going, and they can voice their concerns also. And this probably would have to go through HR to see how this, and Molly, I think you would probably have even structure in this as far as evaluations go. So to me, I think that would benefit all of us all the way around. And I think it would be also helpful all the way around. I mean, what we discussed tonight with Gary, what we're discussing with Janice, I think it's, an evaluation probably would have been very beneficial.
Any other, Ms. Mealy?
Just secondarily, the secondary advantage in a government setting of evaluations is the transparency to the taxpayer as well. When we are asked why our salaries are where they are for various employees, that we should also be able to answer that. Like we're utilizing tax dollars to pay them.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Hearing see none, Mrs. Franklin, the motion to amend, please.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi.
Yes.
Mr. Bider.
Yes.
Ms. Mealy.
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes. Motion to amend passes 7-0. Are there any other motions? I have a couple, but I'll let others do their thing first. Mrs. Katz.
Yes, one of the things that we have to discuss is what we're paying for our leases here with Trade and Transit 1 and 2. What we were told when we moved here, that our rent would be $11 a square foot, and that was determined by the transportation.
Yeah, that was the fair market value, correct.
And that's where it's going to be. And then we were also informed, come January, it's probably going to increase.
No.
No, that's what a previous administrator told us.
No.
That came down in an email that,
Oh, yeah, no, that's incorrect. Yeah.
okay. But so it'll still stay at $11.
Yeah, we're
a
locked
square
in
foot.
at that for the next 4 years. Yeah, the lease agreement.
Well, the one thing that I think we, are looking at as far as breaking down all of our, what it costs for us to use this room. We're not the only ones using this room. Police, fire, I don't know who else uses this room, but there's zoning, a whole lot of people, right? So therefore, we don't, it's not stated in the budget if this is broken down to each department where it came from. I have no idea. Tracy, is it broken down at all?
Are you referring specifically to this room?
Each department has their leases that they're supposed to be paying, but so many of the departments use this room also. And I want to know if the cost is being spread out amongst everybody, or is this one general cost?
For this room?
Yeah, for this room.
Okay, so what I was told from our VTA is that you get 80 hours of time free in this room for the entire
80 hours free.
8 hours free. And then after that, they estimated $100 a month for city council meetings. And that was it. That's all they told me that they would charge.
Okay, because I didn't realize.
There's $1,200 that I added to your budget in the original budget, not
I
added.
saw
It has
1,200,
been,
I thought,
right. So they said that's for cleaning for after city council meetings. But other than that, they said they felt that the hours would fit in those hours.
Okay, because I didn't realize the 80 hours were free. I thought we had to pay also.
That's what was communicated to me.
Okay, okay, just wanted to clarify that. Mayor, is that what you understood
Yes,
also?
that's what I understand, yeah.
Okay. But we're still looking at $11 a square foot. We could get cheaper rent elsewhere. Okay, and I
Potentially.
think, if we're smart and we have to save taxpayers' money, I think we should be looking into other areas maybe of where we can go that it would be more cost effective instead of what we're paying here. I think I'm throwing out. I threw it out in the very beginning when this came up, as far as rents go, what we're paying. That, it's, we should be cognizant of what money is being spent on our spaces at this point. We're no longer doing anything with City Hall except paying for, I take it, utilities. And that's about all that was utilities. And even that's a little bit of money at this point. I don't think there's that much left in the City Hall account.
Not sure what's in the city hall.
From what I looked at, and Randy and I were looking at this, there isn't that much left.
There was 200, I believe around $200,000.
For 200,000?
I need to look into that. Are you referring to the cash carryover? I want to answer the right question.
I know. There was a City Hall account, okay, and I wanted to know what's left in that account at this point.
Okay, if you give me a moment. I'll
Sure.
check.
Computers can be a joy and a.
Yeah, I can't access, unfortunately, I can't access the main server from here, so I'm going to have to find that for you.
Okay, if you can get the.
I believe, I will say that I believe it was around $200,000 carryover into next year.
Okay, okay. So it's something that I think I would like to see what the rest of council and the administration thinks about this, of where we should go. I mean, eventually you have to bring codes back into some area. I mean, they're in RVT.
Right. So we've already started working on that, actually. It's looking as though we will be able to bring them back to Trade and Transit 1. We actually had a meeting last week, I believe it was, maybe this week, I don't remember, with RVT folks, RVTA folks. What I would say is we continue to explore options. I don't think we should pack up and move at the moment. My recommendation would be to let Tracy continue to work through the finances so we have a more accurate picture of that, get us back on solid footing. Obviously, we've got the train back on the tracks at the moment. And I don't think we should jump back off that train. But while the train is heading in the right direction, we continue to explore other possibilities as we're moving forward. So I would say, I think the other thing we have to consider would be the morale of the employees. I think I'll tell them tomorrow to pack up and move again, get all of our public works folks over here and have them move in offices all over the place. I don't think that would go over very well. Separately from that, it is a possibility from our understanding, speaking with FTA, that one of the buildings may come back to the city. That's obviously not taking place yet, but that's a possibility as well. So I think we have to get a few more pieces in place, would be my humble recommendation, and we continue to explore possibilities simultaneously. So I'm not saying that, I'm against that. I don't think we have to make a knee-jerk reaction at the moment. We can take our time and make the best decision moving forward, both in the short term and the long term. I think for the moment, though, we continue to solidify our financial standing and then look at options to explore for the long term.
Well, I appreciate that, Mary, I really do, because I what we were told with everything that was going on, that Trade and Transit 1 and 2, and this comes from emails over the past year at this point, I'd say, that we might owe RVT money for these buildings. And it kind of scares me that, we don't know where we stand. I can't see where that would be possible, especially with Trade and Transit One, since the city was very much involved in that building. So there's a bunch of questions. I'm getting frustrated not getting a lot of the answers.
Well, I think part of that is it's going to take some time. And it is taking time, and it's going to continue to take a little bit of time. The survey, from my understanding, is done. What was surveyed up at RVTA. And I believe that will be coming before all of you in a not too distant future. Of course, clearly I cannot speak for RVTA, but I'd recommend maybe reaching out to Joe Nagy or Todd Wright at this point to see where they are with that. And then the transfer of the assets, I believe that's what you're talking about. And then backing some of those that were surveyed out, Elm Park, for example, would have no transit use. That would clearly come back to the city. But initially transferring of the assets, getting all of that done. Again, I think that makes the point perfectly, that I don't think we should really make any other decisions until we get some of these ones shored up. Speaking of TT1 or TT2 and what may or may not be owed, I can't speak to that, obviously, but we're working through all that as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Bonnie, to your point, so, I mean, Mayor Slaughter, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, right? I think a number of us, with what we're seeing right now, I think a number of us think that moving over to Third Street Plaza makes a lot of sense for a handful of different reasons, right? It's much more cost effective compared to where we're at. We are in a situation where at some point or another, we're going to have to borrow a ton of money or cut a lot of stuff to keep us from going into whatever the law was, Act 47 or whatever it is, for going into financial distress. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Going there positions us to maximize resources between two governmental entities and position us to help bridge that gap between revenue and expenses. This is the future that I would list it, but this is the first time hearing that one of these buildings might come back to us. And the reason I say that, the other thing that I've at least learned, we've been through this a couple of times in 3 years. This is going to continuously be a moving target. So, I mean, outside of inheriting a building or building a building, I mean, we're going to be, what's that?
Do we have any rich uncles?
I don't think so. I don't think so. So I think there's a number of variables that, and from my perspective, it makes a lot of sense. I think as we digest and continue to think about this, to me, I don't know why we can't do that at another location. When I think about the codes office moving, if they're already planning to move, in my mind, I don't know why they couldn't just move Catty Corner to Trade Transit 1 versus Trade and Transit 1 itself. How many employees do we currently have in Trade and Transit
1? I mean, like 20-ish, probably.
20-ish, okay, gotcha. So, I mean, as frustrating as it is, and I can certainly understand our employees' perspective and can sympathize with it to a degree. I mean, we're not moving the entirety of all employees in city government. So in my mind, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if there's a motion to be made to change that, I would support it. I don't think we would need to do that tomorrow, right, in January. I mean, I think being responsible about that would look like it happening if we would decide to do that sometime in the back half of next year, right? We were fortunate that we were able to get over here just like that. The administration did a really good job of, in crisis hour, moving over here. It's fair at all to expect the administration to that. That could be accommodated at the back end of next year at some point as well. That gives us time to, if we would do that, to negotiate and all that kind of stuff. So I'll get off of my soapbox. I think it's a good idea. I would support it, but in fairness to the administration. We did just talk about it yesterday, so that's up to the council members if they would like to make that motion.
And just to clarify one thing, I wasn't referring to train transit 1 and 2. There's another property potentially. So wasn't referring that they would give either one of these buildings back. The Transportation Museum is what most likely will come back to us.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but I don't want to, it's not set in stone or anything. like that.
Understood.
And
Understood.
I think, and again, in reference to Third Street Plaza, I think, again, we don't know the details, of any of that. We wouldn't know what services would even make sense to share. I think that has a lot of variables that we would need to work through. If that were to take place, I disagree personally with that sentiment at this point. I'm not saying my mind can't be changed down the road, but I don't see at this point what services or what the benefit would be at this point to make that without really even knowing our own financial situation. To go with the commissioners who might turn over next year. We know there's going to be at least one new one. So I think there's just a lot of variables there to work through.
Thank you. Okay.
I just wanted to open up the discussion.
Okay. Anything on that discussion item? Does anybody have any other amendments? Ms. Mealy?
Well, I actually don't have any amendments, but I did have a very basic question that I neglected to ask during the budget session, which is, Tracy, how did we arrive at our beginning fund balance and how confident are we that it's accurate? Absent several years worth of audits.
I believe that when the mayor presented the budget originally, we said that the systems are antiquated and not accurate, and we did the numbers to the best of our ability at that time. I continue to find errors in the systems, and they are a roll forward of prior year numbers at this point that have not been audited.
Okay. Consequently, you're telling me that we're counting on having $3.6 million. We have a nearly deficit spending budget, but we're relying on a number that may or may not exist of 3.6 million to begin the budget year.
Cash has been reconciled for the most part, but there are receivables in those numbers, and there is, I have found that there has been cash deposited in certain funds that should be in other funds and have not been able to rectify those numbers as of today. So in total, I can tell you that what cash we have, I just can't tell you by fund if it is correct.
Okay. So you're saying we don't believe we have any accounts payable that would put us at a less than, for instance, I think the IRS tax bill we referenced once upon a time of $100,000.
I cannot guarantee any of these numbers at this point because I have done my best to get them as accurately as possible for this presentation and to get you numbers for a budget, but they are unaudited and they are not reconciled. Cash is reconciled, but other accounts within the system have not been.
Okay. I understand. I mean, part of obviously what's being demonstrated by the budget even this year, that we ended the 2022 budget process with an estimated ending balance of 203,000, and yet now we actually began 2022 with about with about $1 million more than we thought we had in the bottom line, and then we actually ended 2022 with about $3 million more than we expected to have in the bottom line. I understand that generally speaking, we over budget and we understand. Consequently, this is not me saying we're likely to wind up in a bad position, but to the 8 million other caveats, I would issue about $3 million deficit spending. I will add the fact that it is not clear that we have the $3 million worth of deficit to spend or worth of income to spend. But, so actually the only I think there are a handful of other things that still need to be worked through with the budget. And I look forward to working through those between this meeting and next. One of those obviously being Mr. Nar's salary, which we let lapse until then, but I think there will be other things. But my primary concern with this budget, and it's been my concern with the last several budgets, and I expect that this year, as with the last several budgets, my concerns will be somewhat ignored. But we are engaging in $3 million worth of deficit spending. We know that we're process again next year. More than likely, all of the city's employees will be receiving at least a 3% wage increase, likely to come out to about $1 million, if not more. So we're looking at basically when we begin the budget process next year, we wouldn't, I would not expect our revenue, but we will need $4 million to make the budget balance next year if we proceed as we are currently proceeding. The reason that that makes me nervous is that we don't have the $4 million anywhere. and what I have yet to I've talked to the administration a bit about it in private, and I don't know if there's been any sort of revelation in the meantime. I don't see a path for us arriving at that $4 million for next year, short of raising taxes next year by a pretty grotesque amount, because I want to say that comes up somewhere between 5 and 6 mils of real estate valuation. I don't know what we plan to do about that. and I'm not saying that it does, but I would certainly hope that some folks share my concern about that. And I think that all of us know that there isn't $3 million worth of spending that we can cut from this year's budget to make it align with this year's projected revenues. That would be a third of the police department, half of the fire department. It would be all of everything else. No, that's not quite true. Sorry. I would personally advocate for the idea if amount this year that would give us in our coffers something at least toward that $3 million next year, and also the beginning of further earnings toward that $3 million in the year to follow. I don't believe that anyone else on council would support that, but I will just go ahead and put it out there because I see us digging ourselves with the help of American Rescue Plan Act funds into a financial hole that we will have a very hard time digging ourselves out of next year. And I'm not looking forward to that budget process in the slightest. and so I am advocating for doing something to at least begin to alleviate it this year.
I am still getting over 2021's budget, to be honest with you. So that was a pretty brutal process. I mean, look, Ms. Mealy, you're right. Okay. And I'm not going to sit here and argue that your thought process about a incremental tax increase doesn't have logic to it, right? I am not going to sit here and say that it isn't even necessarily. I would counter that with, I would not support that this year. And I would counter that with the way, literally where we're at now is we have to get very creative with how we offer services. And those conversations they're not popular. They're not easy, but that's what we're tasked to do, unfortunately. Here's an example. And this is, I'm not planning to make any of these motions tonight, but we should seriously consider having our recreation department privatized. And I say that because it costs us $350,000 a year to offer our programs, and we have to see if there's a private sector way to do that much more cost effectively. I'm not going to say that the qualitative benefits aren't there. There absolutely are. There's a huge benefit to having those. But in the situation that we're in, that is something that we absolutely have to look at. This one's unpopular also, but we have to look at policing differently. And I'm not going to sit here and say that, our police officers don't do good work. They really do. And we have a need for them 100%. But we need to figure out how to offer police services in our city a heck of a lot more cost effectively. And I don't know exactly what that looks like. I don't know if that's formalized partnerships with other police entities. Maybe that's regionalization. And I see you looking at me. I get it. Trust me. But that's the next step, and that's unfortunately how we fix that. I mean, again, we don't have the revenue, the organic revenue, to meet our obligations, and that's nobody's fault sitting here. And that's nobody's fault in the administration either. That's Harrisburg. The deck is stacked against us, and it's stacked against every third-class city. Randy, we were just talking about that before the meeting. I mean, there's all kinds of literature going out right now about these same conversations are happening in every third-class city across the state. If there was ever a need for any kind of actual real reform in the state, it's municipal tax reform, and it's loosening up the requirements that we have to do. And this is a huge soapbox. I get it. Nothing's going to come of this tonight, but it needs to be said. It needs to be said on the record. Our state legislators need to get off of their rear ends and actually do something about it. 100%. Jamie Flick, Joe Ham, Jeannie all three of them. Absolutely. And they hear it from me, and they don't like it, but they do. So anyway, Miss Mealy, I get it. I'm nervous about the next couple of years too, but without looking at and making progress in doing things differently, I personally struggle to raise taxes because I'm concerned about continuing to incentivize not thinking outside of the box. Does that make sense?
And I agree with you. That's not what I'm saying. I see and I appreciate your point, Adam. All that I am saying is that we are, Derek, unless you came up with some sort of brainstorm or something like that that is going to retrieve $3 million next year. I mean, we're up against it, and we are, to my way of thinking, effectively hurting the citizens of Williamsport by letting this budget continue as it is. You know, there's not, it is not responsible governance. And I agree with you that we need to have the hard conversations, but we are also not having those hard conversations. Ideally, next year, we start the budget process sometime in June, you know, and we begin to have those hard conversations then, because they're going to be real hard next year. Yep. But, you know, I simply, you know, $4 million is ungodly hard. $4 million is, right, half of the cops, half of the fire department. It's, we cannot cut that out of next budget, no matter how hard we try. And consequently, a responsible incremental tax increase would help to lessen that burden when we begin those conversations next year.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah.
That's okay. I'm off my high horse now.
Well, I'll get off of mine too. I hope, and I mean, I think expecting the budget to look different next year is a bit strong language. But I mean, it's critically important. It really is. I mean, Mayor Slaughter, I know you're around the state a lot, and I think that's great. You know, if some of the things you're learning, for example, are in this, I'm not personally seeing it, and I would really like to. That's what I'm saying, right? And so I can't urge you enough, and beg, plead enough. This really needs to look different next year, and that's hard to do. I get it. Trust me, I have to vote on it, right? But we need to do that. We really, really do.
Well, I would respectfully disagree with you. I think this budget looks significantly different than the previous 2 years. Obviously, I think we all agree with that. Just looking at the capital projects alone, having Tracy here from June to say that that effectively is saying that she hasn't done anything, I would strongly disagree with that. I think these numbers, as Tracy continues to work through, and what she just alluded to a few minutes ago, it's going to continue to shift. We don't know what the numbers might be a year from now as Tracy continues to dive into this. It could put us in a better position. We don't know this. But this budget right here, in my humble opinion, with the work that Tracy and all of the administration has done on this, looks way different. It's much better than where we were, bringing Tracy in as someone that loved and this brings, and the position that she has us in now, and she will continue to get us in. So I would strongly disagree that this budget does not look any different. I think it's significantly improved, and it will continue to improve. Our numbers will continue to improve as she works through them and working with the auditors. She has an auditing background and all the experience that she brings, and that will continue to be reflected, obviously, to City Council, and we continue to work through that together. But these numbers are as good as we can get them for the moment, given this position and the situation that we are in, but they will continue to improve. It's improved, but obviously we're not where we were, we're not where we need to be, but we're headed in that direction. And so having Tracy here has been, as I said, a tremendous improvement.
Ms. Mealy.
And Derek, I apologize. The criticism of the deficit does not equate to a criticism of the budget as a whole. We need to think much more creatively, and we will be forced to think much more creatively next year. So it's kind of a moot point on that one. But the idea of setting up a capital projects fund that actually leads to somewhere, the idea of tying money in for needed equipment over the next, in perpetuity, effectively for meeting the city's capital needs over the long term, is an excellent thing that should have happened a long time ago. And I think all of us are exceptionally grateful to have Tracy's input and Tracy's assistance in constructing a budget that is responsible and provides for the long-term needs of the city. And none of my discussion about the deficit should take away from that. We are making progress. That is, I am absolutely not saying that we are not. But I am saying that unfortunately we still have a lot of progress to make, and you know, and that the final story, even if it does turn out that there is more money that has not been accounted for, even if we do turn up a couple $1 million next year, is that we are still in a position where our total revenues are, well, sorry, these are skewed numbers. Hang on, our total revenues are about $24.8 million, and our total expenditures are about 27.6, right? Is that correct? I'm just pulling the ARPA funds out of both sides of that, Tracy. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Am I looking at, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Are you looking at the general fund?
Are you
She said?
just looking at general fund, or what are you looking at?
Yeah, I'm just looking at general fund.
Okay, so general fund. Proposed revenues for the general fund of 28.8.
But that includes $4 million of ARPA funding. That's
Oh,
why
I'm
I was
sorry,
just
that's
taking
what you
it,
were backing
right.
out. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, that was why it took me a second to
Yes,
do the
yeah.
math. Our revenues, we're taking in about $24.8 million annually in tax revenues and various and sundry other revenues. And we are spending about 27. And even if we discover more money that has fallen out of previous budgets, it's not probably going to effectively change those numbers all that much. So that is what we need to figure out, is a way to make our revenues and our expenditures gel. But perhaps Tracy, you were wait, no, never mind. You weren't going to make that point. I was just about to say, it does look as though we were under budget last year, but we weren't. That was the trend. Yes.
I think one of the things that Mayor is referring to is I have found that there are a number of revenue sources that aren't presented as revenue in your budgets. And so I'm working towards finding out why that has been happening in the past. And then those might increase your revenues next year if they're actually hitting revenues like they should. I have found some older billings that had not taken place. So we're working on getting those billed as well. So we do anticipate that there may be some additional revenues, but again, because I'm just getting to that point of working through those, they're included in the budget.
All right. We're looking forward to that, and hopefully that will be the case. Yeah. If you find $3 million in additional revenue coming into the city on an annual basis, I will be friggin' delighted. and I will happily eat all of my words in whatever sort of public fashion you would like me to. But in the meantime, all I will continue to say is that we need to figure out a way to bring what we take into line with what we spend. because that's just budgeting. And so I will continue to advocate for trying to bring those numbers closer to one another, whether it's by cutting, whether it's by increasing our revenues. Ideally, we do both. And ideally, we do a lot of the increasing of the revenues by increased equipment in the city, but we know that that's a long game that we're playing there and that we're not going to see that next year. So anyway, okay, sorry, I'm done.
No worries. Let's come up from the rabbit hole. Anybody have any proposed changes or amendments that they would like to make? Let's kind of, I guess, maybe get back on course here.
There's a proposed change that I would like to make, actually two, but one that I would like to start with, which will lead to the second. If we turn to the capital project for the emergency rescue vehicle for the police department, the proposed investment is $310,000. I would like to change that to 0.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions or from other members of council on the proposed amendment? Mr. Pelisi.
Thank you. So if I may, I'm conflicted. I understand why. I've spoken to the chief and I've spoken to other members of the administration. And my feelings are that at some point in time, I look at the emergency rescue vehicle as just that. It's an emergency rescue vehicle. That it's one of those things that you, God forbid you ever need it and you don't have it. I'd much rather have it and never need it than need it and never have it. So I do really see the need for Williamsport to have one. And I understand and I support the chiefs wanting to put that into the budget and the forward thinking, especially with us getting bigger, having bigger Little League World Series, Welcomes to World events, MLB being here. I get the need for us having them. We were fortunate enough to host the former president of the United States here this year. These are certain pieces of equipment that we have to have. However, on the flip side, I also understand that, and I agree with other members of the council, Williamsport shouldn't have to foot the burden for all this. If this is going to be an emergency vehicle that services not just Williamsport, but the surrounding communities, the surrounding municipalities, counties, I think our CERT team responds to, is it 8 counties? Yep. Sorry. Just for the record, I can count. I said 8 and I have 5 fingers. But yeah, I can count. But yes. So I think, do I want to see Williamsport have an emergency rescue vehicle? Absolutely. I do. That's exactly what they do, is they save lives. Do I think Williamsport should be the one to have to foot the bill for all of it? No, I don't. I think that this is something, and hopefully, this is something that could start a conversation with us, with other local municipalities, neighboring counties, some other entities within the city itself that host events that we need to have this equipment for. Because I believe right now, we end up having to essentially borrow one of these. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. For the events that we. Right. So, yeah, I wanted to get my point out there is that, Chief, I believe we should have one. I do. I firmly do. And with the rest of council, but I don't think Williamsport should have to foot the bill for the entirety of the purchase. And, I hope that this can open to some really good dialogue between us and our surrounding municipalities, counties, whoever it may be, that we can make this happen. I really believe that we can have one here. And hopefully it'll be the start of a better relationship with some of these agencies, governmental bodies, whatever they may be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pelisi. I would agree. I mean, and this ties back in with what Ms. Mealy and I were really talking about. I mean, none of these decisions are, I mean, really easy, to be honest with you. I mean, completely agree with everything. I mean, realistically, in my mind, this is a regional resource, and I would be extremely delighted and glad to pitch in for part of this 100%, but we need to be pitching into a regional resource. I don't know if that's the county. I don't know if it's a combination of count. I don't know what it is, but you know, we're in a position to lead that effort, but we really have to do that. And it's not easy. I get it, but if we can make headway on that, I'd be more than happy to, you know, revisit down the road a transfer of something toward that. But I share Mr. Pelisi's sentiment, so. Mrs. Katz.
Chief, do they charge us for renting, any rental when we borrow it? Yes.
We have an MOU set up with that.
Okay. How did they, okay, would you know how they got there since we know the price tag of this?
They belong in another, the city has charity task force. They were a different one prior to when they doctors that they have a lot more funded in their budget. So they got theirs when they were in another. For several reasons with their Pennsylvania, that's broken down based on the city. And in our region, the way it works, we always get allocated a certain amount for all the perspective. And nothing goes 10 out. So it's not just what is required.
So really, it's a large group that, and that's not the proper word probably.
Understand what that is. That's a terrorist task force. So in the event of a terrorist attack, that's when we would be called to respond to these other towns. Versus being a multi-jurisdictional team within responsible jurisdiction. So to understand a little bit of difference between a task force with a terrorist task force versus what our operational status is with the city.
When you do get that vehicle, when you borrow that vehicle, it's called the Bearcat, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool. It's
Thank you,
similar
Derek.
to the one that we have now. We have an armored vehicle from 1985 that's very antiquated and quite concerning when we right now putting officers in there.
Is there special training that's required to?
There is. Once you purchase a vehicle, Lenco, the company that builds the vehicle, they provide a driver's course. And then we've already actually been through training with Columbia Mine Tour for operating the vehicle and doing tactical operations from the vehicle, as well as rescue vehicles. It's just a tactical vehicle per se. It could be used for water operations, rescue on floods. And it has a capability to go off-road and go to rural areas as well. So.
I think about this, we have different thing in different areas at this point.
I've been
Trying.
trying. I'm laying the foundation now, trying to get it out there, having conversations. A lot of people look at me kind of like you guys are looking at me now when I bring up the $300,000 cost.
During the headlights, right?
Yeah, and I get it's expensive. I've been trying to work with something. That's why I put it in the budget to try to get something going instead of getting burdened with one large cost all at once. So.
Has the county been receptive in any of this?
The county has. I talked to the district attorney's office, and so they're receptive to participating in this from talking to them before. So.
Okay. Thank you very much for the information.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Pulse?
Action and expecting a different result, right? So at this point in time, you know, I would support Mr. Biter's motion to remove this, but only because I think that I want to see us also go after some additional help and funding to help Williamsport first. And if we don't make any headway or progress with that, then I'll be bringing it back up. But again, if we try and we try and we try and we don't get anywhere, you know, we could still potentially find this money in the order. But like I said, this is a life-saving piece of equipment. So, but I would like to see us try and get it, or at least some of it elsewhere first. And if that doesn't work, then I'll be bringing it back up. Thank you.
Understood. Mr. Allison?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Pelisi. It's worth the effort to look at different ways to fund this. And police already are doing that, but we need to be a part of that conversation. I think city council. So, I mean, I'm in favor of doing that, but we need to be committed to it and, you know, have a plan, I think, of what we can do on council, whether it's, you know, have an ad hoc committee that's going to look at this and work on it, whatever form or substance it might take. But just, you know, we're 3 months into next year, and oh yeah, we got to get moving on that. You know, that we're really dedicated to that purpose, and that we can revisit it then if it's not going to happen that way. So I think it's worth trying. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing that. I do know that the chief has done an awful lot of research and has a lot of information regarding the vehicle. So I think we could do a great job and maybe even see if our contracted firms, Delta or Keller, whomever it may be, see if there's some grants. No? And that didn't get anywhere? Okay. Well, again, I'd like to see if we can't go to the county first, maybe some other institutions, organizations here within the city that benefit from said events that we need to have this piece of equipment for, see if they'll help contribute.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
President Yoder.
Yeah, sorry.
Council consider cutting that cost in half and then setting the chief a task to get a match for it? So continuing to keep 150 in the budget, and then he would be tasked with finding 50% match and just proposing it.
What I'd be comfortable with right now, as I look at the ARPA budget going forward, that is $2,500. I'd be willing to commit that for the capital budget to start, and then going forward, we can show commitment to other municipalities and other members of that terrorism task force, whether it be other counties, local municipalities, and so on. Because I believe, and after we get through this particular amendment, you'll see that.
Yeah, I would support that also. I mean, and again, you know, there's what, 8 or 10 counties, right, that are a part of this task force, correct? So there's ideally a lot of other municipalities that could be putting into this. So I think that's a good starting point for sure. And I would reinforce the point, you know, are we the largest municipality that is involved in this? Okay. I think it would be wise for us to figure out a mechanism to make that commitment and to make that relationship formal and sustainable. I mean, I don't want to say authority, but like something along those lines where there's, you know, maybe it's an organization with just a bunch of MOUs. I don't know what it looks like, but something to keep that formalized, because, you know, it's not only good for them to, I think, contribute to purchasing it, but we're going to need their help to maintain it as well. And any other resources, I think, that are associated with that task force, I think that's a good model to replicate. So again, I'm not a public safety expert. I don't know what that formal, mechanism is or what it looks like, but we should really, I think, figure that out and figure out where that's going to be housed as well. So. Well, I mean, I don't mean like the physical location of the Bearcat. I mean like the structure of the organization, the rules, the bank accounts, what have you. Like I feel like there needs to be some formal organization that
The actual itself is broken down. There's a lot of funds that come through. That task force is really a that's not operations that we do at a multi-jurisdiction. When we go multi-jurisdictional level, we're operating as a SWAT team or security for the county. That's a different operation than really the funding for the That's what but the weeks are set up different. So that's a whole different than what our actual operating goes on.
Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah, I understand that completely. I think the CERT team needs the regional resource also. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, understood. We can continue the conversation.
And this is what I said, yeah. Already several times, well, I want to have this conversation, talk about this stuff. But a lot of that stuff comes through the time. But I'm always open. I'll say again, I talked to a couple of you. Talking to all of you, I'm going to talk to the last police station, what we're doing, what we're trying to do, with all aspects of this. From the bed to the vehicle to personnel. So I really like that. They're trying to bring some new ideas and great ideas to the table. Help me make this be the best. I want to share with them. We're going to talk about it for the rest of the day. So we come up. So regarding the plan that we have, that we're doing, we're just going to survey with the college. That's some great feedback. We have a lot of things. We got some good ideas. But we got perspectives that really what we want. What we're looking for.
So Mr. Biter, do you want to rescind the motion and remove or
Yes,
amend? Yeah.
so I'll rescind that motion and make a new motion to take that amount from $310,000 to $15,500.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any additional questions or comments related to the revised motion?
Just as an addendum to this whole conversation, I think, one way I look at all of this is that we live in a different world now, and it's constantly getting, whether we like it or not, more violent and more unpredictable. And we can't say with any degree of certainty that something could not happen in our city or our area, because we see the example regularly now. And that's hard to quantify what that means, but we need to be cognizant of it, and that needs to be part of the conversation as well. Because when you weigh that out, and you see some of the things that have happened in our nation and in our society, the destruction that can be bring havoc and pain and all kinds of terrible things. I can't think of an entity that would say, I'm glad we didn't spend that money, because we saved money, but we weren't able to respond. So, maybe that's over dramatizing it, but it's just an aspect, I think, that we need to keep part of this conversation, because that's the real world, and that's the real world our public safety departments work in on a daily basis. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. Mr. Mayor Slaughter, excuse me.
And one other piece to the funding aspect, I think would be with Congressman Muser. He'll become our congressman in January, will be his largest district, and I believe he has previously secured funding. I think Councilman Pelisi has said that for emergency rescue vehicles in another municipality. So once he officially becomes our congressman, I think we could work with him and his team to see if there's other funding out there from the federal level that maybe can secure some for us as well. We will be his largest district as well, or the largest city in his district come January.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Any other comments or questions related to the revised motion? Okay, good discussion. Mrs. Frank on the vote for the amendments.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Mr. Bider, you mentioned you had another one.
I do have another one. So the monies that we have left over from that are $294,500. I had previously discussed with Mr. Livermore at one of our last meetings about a line item that was missing in the flood control budget. And that is a line item for Graffius Run. I feel that it is imperative that we have some action taken there and not just wait for studies and consultants to be done. If we have some money there that we can allocate, whether it be for an employee that can be there at a more pertinent time when we have flooding issues, rain issues, things like that. It's very disturbing to have to, I would imagine, be very disturbing to be a resident in that neighborhood and wonder every time it rains if the city's going to have somebody there to dig out the debris that clogs up the drain, and then their house is going to end up being flooded, whether it be with mud or rainwater from the various outlets that come down the stream.
So you made the motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any additional discussion, comments, questions from members of council? I think it's a great idea. I appreciate you making the motion and bringing it up.
I would appreciate Mr. Livermore then. I know that you have some plans that you talked about with Mr. Sanders. You don't need to expand upon them right now, but it would be wonderful that if we have some stuff at the beginning of next year to really go over, but thank you.
I would just add that Wood is in the process, they submitted and there's scheduling a meeting so we can keep council informed on that, on the initial report that they're doing for some short-term and long-term fixes there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Slaughter. Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion to amend, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Ms. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend passes 7-0. Anybody else have anything at the moment? Okay, I'll make a couple here. So I think the right place to do this are these locations, Tracy. If they're not, just tell me, okay? So can you refresh my memory under the revenue sources, the difference between the two lost revenues? What I want to do is we switch over from ARPA. So we- I don't know which was the appropriate one.
They're the same category.
They're the same
They're-
category, but-
Right, it's actually one line, so it
Okay,
doesn't
so it doesn't matter,
which
okay.
one you
Yep.
included in. It was just more
Gotcha.
for my visual
Okay.
of what was going on.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to clarify that, so thank you very much. I would make a motion to increase the ARPA lost revenue line item by $3,602,149.
Second.
Motion in a second. This is moving over the money that we just transferred in second reading of ARPA to lost revenue. This is the procedure to, get that through the budget. Okay. Any comments or questions? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Franklin, the motion to amend.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend passes 7-0. Tracy, if there's a different place to do this, then let me know, but I would also make then a motion to amend the general fund summary to create a line item for reserve emergency fund with revenues in the amount of $3,602,149. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion in a second. Any comments or questions? Doesn't exist, we'll create it next week.
Can you clarify for me what your intent is?
So the intent is to establish a separate reserve emergency fund to, similar to capital projects fund, but not for planned capital projects, for larger either emergencies like a pandemic that might happen, or larger projects where we don't either have any kind of concrete idea of what we need to accomplish, but we want to stash money away. Does that make sense?
Yes, very good. I just wanted to make sure you wanted it in a separate fund within the system and not just
Yes.
separate within the cash account.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, the intent, I think the idea is to have a separate fund in the system. We'll be bringing forward an ordinance to actually codify the use of the fund and how to take money out of that as well. Next week, and I think the first week in January as well.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other comments or questions? Hearing see none, Mrs. Franklin, the motion to amend, please.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend passes 7-0. So there are a couple procedural ones, and I'm probably gonna put these out of order, which is gonna totally mess me up, but that's okay. Does anybody else have any others? Or do we want to save some more for next week? There'll only be 5 of us, so I would recommend if anybody wants to increase anything, we do it this week. So. Okay. Give me 1 minute here. There was one more that I would like to do. Let me just make sure that I find the right line item. And then also find the right. Sorry, bear with me. Remind me, Tracy, so in the budget, where is, sorry, I'm messed up because this isn't bound. I think I pulled it was out of order. Where is the Director of Finance located in the actual, what line item is it in the actual budget? Is it in the Bureau and Fiscal Officer?
Are you looking under for the salaries portion?
Yes,
or
for the
the
salaries
whole
portion.
For the salaries portion, so that
Yes.
would be back on page.
2310, is that the section?
That's the, but I thought you meant the salaries.
No, I know where it is in the salary
Okay.
detail. Where does that
I'm sorry.
reflect in the actual budget?
Let me get to that for you then.
I didn't get a chance to look at pages either, so sorry. If you can give me the title of the budget area or
This
the,
is on page 12 and 13.
which is, oh, yeah, well, these are numbered. Never mind. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I totally missed that. Thank you. All right, so I would, so the budget currently reflects hiring somebody the middle of the year for the Director of Finance, correct?
Yes, I
There's
think
half a
it's halfway
salary in
through.
there, so I
Yeah.
presume
Right,
that's what that
that's
means.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, halfway, yeah.
All right. So I would make a motion to increase that by that salary by 25%. And the reason I would like to make a motion to say that, I would like to see us work through that process sooner. I don't think it's realistic that we're gonna hire somebody January, February, but maybe April is more realistic. And I say that, I mean, I think we need to get that position filled as soon as we can. I think it's a very critical position to get filled. Tracy's doing a very good job. I don't think any of us are gonna sit here and dispute that. And I think we need to keep her around on a very limited basis once that individual is hired. But I mean, I think, Tracy, I remember you talking about triage, right? Your finance office was in triage. At some point, we need to get into rehab. And when you're going through heart surgery and your heart and triage for heart surgery, your surgeon doesn't do rehab, right? And we need to get to that place as soon as we can, and continue that transition in the office. So I'd like to see that happen sooner, and I'd like to make sure that we have the money in the budget to fill that position sooner. So is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second.
But, point of clarification.
Yeah.
How much are you actually increasing that by?
Give me a
By
second.
my
here.
count, it should be about 25.
I said 25%, so I'm sorry, again, let me find it.
It's about $25,000.
Okay, there you go, $25,000. How's that?
Let me shortcut that.
Thank you very much for shortcutting that.
Okay.
Thank you very much for shortcutting that. I was bouncing between a $103,000 line item and
Right, and
and
how it-
salary.
no,
I was like, yeah, that works. So we have a motion in a second. Any other additional questions or comments relating to that proposed change?
I have one. if I may. Oh,
Yes.
sorry, Council.
No, go ahead.
Good, you can go, Councilman. I'll just say that we will try our hardest. I think I'll be blunt, I think it's a bit unrealistic without having 2019, 2020, 2021, and now 2022 audits. Tracy has just sort of started that process. Bringing someone in would reset that all the way back to the beginning. I don't think she would be going anywhere anytime soon. I'll be just frank about that because we just have so much work still to be done. She's still literally just maybe 1/1,000,000th through everything that we're working on. And so we can try, but again, I think we would literally be starting all over again if we brought someone in. And it's just, I think that'd be extremely difficult. And I'm not sure that would really serve us.
Point of clarification, you would reference Tracy doing the audits?
No, not doing the audits. She's working through our side to get the information to the auditors. Yeah, she's not doing the audit yet.
Ms. Mealy?
I think to both of your points, Adam did not cut the amount of money that we have in the budget for Tracy services next year.
Correct.
Right. No, I would.
Correct.
The idea was not to.
Right.
I mean, ideally, yes.
Yes.
Nobody's trying to kick Tracy out the door, but ideally,
Right.
we have slightly less need of your services when we have somebody in the office of training. But I don't think the intention is to try to ease Tracy on her way out so much as try to begin the transition process so that we're not utilizing Tracy's time on things that someone else could easily do. You know.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that there's still a lot of work to be done.
Sure,
Yeah,
but there's no
okay.
reason we can't post that job now. There's no reason we can't and have at least 4 or 5 months to get a really good qualified candidate pool and even potentially make that higher. We could have posted that in October. I mean, Tracy's been here since June, right? You know, I remember when we had the contract in front of us and we made some changes. I think that we all kind of agreed and at least openly discussed, you know, this is a need very much so, but a part of that is we need to get an updated view of what that finance office needs to look like and understand a roadmap for that person. We should have that by now. I think with everything going on in the finance office, I think it's very reasonable to have that in a 6-month time period. And so I think we need to continue in the process and do that. Mr. Biter.
If I recall, when we approved your contract, we put a time limit and or dollar limit on that, whichever were to come first. And I'm curious as to where we are.
Tomorrow will be the
Yep.
last day.
So their contract will be coming next Thursday, actually, to you to extend it. So, I mean, again, I disagree. I mean, I fully disagree. That's just my position on that. I mean, I think we need Tracy. 6 months, given our situation, is not nearly enough time.
I
mean,
don't
it's
think
just-
anyone is questioning the need for Tracy.
Correct.
I-
Nobody's questioning the
I
need
mean,
for
I'm just
Tracy.
saying, you said we should have a roadmap by now. I just disagree. I mean,
What we're all stressing is the simple fact that we want somebody to learn from Tracy as long as possible. And really understand that you have to get up to speed. So we'd like to utilize as much of her time that we're committed to paying for,
Right.
along with somebody else.
right, and I understand that. What I'm explaining is that I don't think we're quite there yet. I mean, she's not able even to say where we are. I mean, so I don't know what, I mean, I think we have to get to a certain point before we can. Now, I agree, obviously, I want that person trained from Tracy, clearly. I'm just saying, I think we need to make a little more progress before, but that's my opinion.
Ms. Mealy.
Anyway, all of them, because the fact of the matter is you guys have to advertise the position, then we have to fill the position.
Right.
And we might not succeed in doing that until the third quarter of next year, one way or the other.
We may
So-
not.
Right.
We very well may not, but I would like to enable the
But now you
administration
will
to
have
do
the
that as
money to
fast
do
as
it.
they can.
Right, and that will enable you to jump on a good candidate if someone were to appear earlier. than
Yes.
that.
I'm trying to help the process. That's
absolutely.
my goal here,
Right.
right? I'm not, the finance off outside of my own personal opinions. I want to help that process. That's the goal here. Mrs. Katz.
And also, if we hire somebody, it would be a newbie that would learn the correct way of doing things. I think that's where we're coming from,
I-
you know?
Right.
I'll disagree with you, Mrs. Katz. This is not a job for a fresh college grad.
Oh, no, no.
New to city of Williamsport, yes.
Yes, you
but-
teach them your way of doing things the right way. Because obviously there have been problems from what we're hearing. And to have somebody come in and learn the process the correct way.
And that's actually why the position hasn't been advertised to date, is because we've been working on getting systems in place that we're going to present to this evening. And with the introduction of those systems, then we'll streamline processes and they will learn the correct ways going forward. With your systems now, it didn't seem like the most efficient process to train someone on systems that are inadequate and then switch them to systems that are adequate. So that's the process we've been kind of walking.
That's where that's where I'm coming from, to learn the correct way and see where we're going, because you're trying to use the term modernize where we're at instead of being antiquated. So therefore, have somebody that's coming in and learning that process.
Any other? Mr. Rouse, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I agree. We want to help the process, but I don't see how, at least for me, I can't help the process unless I have a decent understanding of where we're at in the process. And I haven't had that kind of in-depth conversation to this point. I want to have that next year, so I understand how these things are progressing and why they're progressing and what point we're at in it, because we do want this position in our administration, but timing is everything, and it's got to be done correctly. So that was going to be my question. With what Tracy's dealing with right now, is that conducive to having somebody else around? And I can see where that could actually be detrimental if we're not at that point. So I think it's just a matter of determining I think Gracie says, given that she's uncovered so much, but she could give us an estimate of where we're going. And I think that's another point that a little bit off of this, but I think we need to be able to get some information about where we are going in our city's finances. And I think we're going to get to that point where there'll be some predictability of the trend that we're going into, rather than, well, we just found this out and we just found that out. And so it just sounds like there's a decent amount of unknowables right now. So I think we're all on the same direction. It's just
Certainly understood. Administration's ability to fill that position sooner is a bad thing. I mean, if council disagrees, that's perfectly fine. Hopefully we can get some information next week when we renew the contract. This is a long time coming, I mean, frankly, we really should have been doing this 2 years ago.
I think what's being said, though,
Mrs.
is that
Katz.
it's hard for you to do the job you're trying to accomplish and also have somebody there that's trying to learn in your training. It
Correct,
would
that's-
complicate your process.
Correct. That's why in the budget, I had proposed doing the budget and fiscal officer for 3/4 of a year, because that would give me another couple months to get payroll outsourced, which we'll discuss later, and to continue to work through several of these issues. Then the budget and finance officer would come on. That person would learn to do the daily duties, and then the finance director would be hired shortly after to take on the higher end duties, and I would be transitioning all of that to them. So that was my thought process in putting the budget together the way it had been.
Understood. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, hearing seen on Mrs. Franklin, the motion to amend.
Mr. Allison,
no.
Mr. Mackey,
No.
Mr. Pelisi,
No.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
No.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion fails 4-3. Okay. Any other changes from members of council? We live to fight another day or another week, maybe. Can we have next week? We can make some additional changes.
We're getting close to Christmas. Can we stop fighting this week?
Wow. Hey. As Mr. Pelisi said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting different results. And so I think whenever we get to a point where we're not doing the definition of insanity, maybe we can. Mrs. Franklin, the vote, please.
Mr. Allison,
On which vote?
This is the first reading. This is the vote.
First reading of the budget.
Nobody else had any. The original motion, yeah. So if we are voting to pass this or fail this one first reading. So nobody else seemed to have any more changes.
Okay.
We have next week to make changes if we desire.
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion, was that 7?
Yeah.
All right, motion passes 7-0. We'll move to item 8, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance of the city of Williamsport, county of Lycoming, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, fixing the tax rate for all city purposes for the year 2023 at the sum of 16.22 mils.
Is there a motion and a second?
So
So,
moved.
second.
Motion and a second, Mayor Slaughter.
Yes, good evening again, President Yoder. This is just the ordinance that complements it, setting the tax rate at 16.22 mils.
Thank you, Mayor Slaughter. So this is the same tax rate that we had last year, okay? So we had some pretty lively discussion, I would say, or at least in depth on, the merits one way or the other of a tax increase or not. But currently, as I said, it's the budget as proposed, has no tax increase, and this ordinance reflects that accordingly. And so if there is a desire to amend that one way or the other, we have this reading in next. Norm, same for this, we need 5 to raise, or no? It's a simple majority to increase it? Okay. Only for the budget? Okay, thank you for the clarification. So, any comments or questions related to the millage ordinance? Ms. Mealy?
I am not making a motion to amend because I don't feel like wasting any more of our time this evening. However, I would like to say that my hesitation momentarily that I'm voting for or against the budget, contemplating the fact that I do intend to vote against this ordinance, because I do feel as though we should increase the tax rate. And voting for the budget, of course, is de facto approving the tax rate as is, because I'm approving the fund balance. But anyway, it's semantics, so.
Yeah. Understood. You can help the process and, have your protest vote accordingly. I respect and can certainly appreciate that. So, understood. Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion for item 8, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
No.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-1. Item 9, Mrs. Frank.
Resolution to correct 2022 budget ordinance number 6421 for the city of Williamsport.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Motion and second. Welcome up to the podium.
Finally. So the motion before you, or the resolution before you, is just to correct a typo in your prior year budget. So all of the detail attached to the budget was correct, just the number on the ordinance was wrong. I
Wow.
spoke to the city solicitor and he suggested this is the way just to technically correct it.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for that. I don't know if I don't remember if this was reviewed in committee or not. I don't think it was. It's nothing crazy, was it? Was it in finance? Okay. Anything to add, Ms. Mealy?
That was actually not entirely how it was explained to us in finance. That is,
Oh.
in fact, exactly what it is.
I'm sorry, I was not at that meeting. Can you repeat what you said?
I said that was actually not entirely how it was explained to us in finance. It was explained to us that we were correcting the number for the capital projects, what we'd spent in 2022, I believe. Versus, right.
So the budget for 2022 in the detail, in the support detail was correct. But the number that had been carried forward to the ordinance for actual appropriations was wrong. It was actually the prior year number. It hadn't been updated for 2022. So it is just a typographical correction.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. It was explained to us as just a discrepancy between what was actually spent and what, but that is even better, I suppose. A typographical error, so, okay.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing seen on Mrs. Frank on the motion for item 9, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 10, Mrs. Frank.
Resolution 2021 real estate refund for the e-check.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Mackey. Mr. K. Mackey, not J. Mackey.
No relation either. Yes, I have an e-check refund that needs to be issued. I had taxpayer 1 make a typo that forced them to pay taxpayer 2's property taxes. It was a very weird and strange coincidence of numbers there. They both happened to be around the same amount and they were 1 digit off on their parcels. So, but they are looking to get a refund sent to the county delinquent office because it was for last year's taxes in the amount of $1658.97, and the difference of what she is owed is $27.10 because she actually paid a little over.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mackey. Remind me, were these reviewed in finance? I didn't get a chance to. It was not, okay. So go ahead.
The county and the delinquent office, all three of us got together, and reviewed what was going on. So
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Any questions or comments from members of council? I don't know that's a trend out here, so. Mr. Pelisi.
Even though we're issuing a refund, I just want to go on the record and say I commend whomever the taxpayer is that actually pay a little bit more. That's pretty rare.
That's how we're gonna balance the budget.
Yeah.
Ms. Mealy always brings this up whenever we have a real estate, no, seriously, people always fight their things and they never fight to pay more. So this individual did, at least for a little bit, and that's very unheard of, so.
That is, that is why a new assessment is so absolutely essential in the county, as we all know.
Well, I would completely agree, and hopefully our commissioners are listening and are making plans to do an assessment, so. Please. Okay, here you see no other questions. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi.
Yes.
Mr. Bider.
Yes.
Ms. Mealy.
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Item 11, Mrs. Frank.
Resolution real estate refund for 2021 Reach Road.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Mackey, the floor is yours again, sir.
yes, so this was again an assessment, as we were just speaking of, and they had actually found that it was worth about $250,000 less abouts, and does result in a refund being issued to the taxpayer in an amount of $4,000, or amount of $4,042 and 8.
Ms. Mealy.
A very random question, Mr. Mackey, but how is the current real estate market affecting real estate valuations like this? For instance, when was this completed? I'm assuming relatively recently?
This assessment was recent, yes. I'm not sure on the specific last real estate thing, though I think it was somewhere in 2004, but don't quote me on that.
Oh, no. I understood it was
Okay.
2004, when we last did an assessment within the county. What I'm asking is, it seems as though real estate values by and large on the market are rising. Is that affecting at all the way in which, when people request a reassessment, the properties are being valued? Do we have any kind of insight into that? I'm just kind of curious, because it would seem as though, right, we should then see people's properties being valued at a higher level across the board, because the real estate market is really high right now.
Well,
But-
yeah, and especially because things have changed in the past 20 years with in regards to how the last assessment was done. That would certainly update a lot of things. It might not have to do taxes for that one, but
Well, that, sorry.
the county does handle all the assessments in the assessment office. My office just receives what their work is saying it's actually worth.
Got it. I guess I would be curious to understand thoroughly if you, but we certainly have seen a number of reassessments on property where the value of the property was lowered. But it would seem as though values of property in general within the city should be higher than they have been previously. And consequently, I'm wondering who submits the documentation, exactly how it's evaluated, et cetera. But that's not really a question for here and now. Sorry, I thought it was a simpler inquiry than that. Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Hearing seen none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi.
Yes.
Mr. Bider.
Yes.
Ms. Mealy.
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
We'll move, Mrs. Frank.
Resolution accepting a contract with K-Time for online human resources and payroll services.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Evening, Molly.
Hello. So we've been talking all night about our antiquated systems. So we're excited to bring this to you. Since the mayor took office, he's been interested in updating currently we have and I use notice if that's system would lose the ability to roll, pay bills, except accounts receivable. So time is of the essence. Tracy and I have been working with several different companies, have landed on pay time with regard to the systems that it brings to us and its cost. So we would be looking at an implementation cost of $3,500 and then $28,000 and some change in annual fees. This would be funded, the implementation costs would be funded by DCED Strategic Management Planning Program at 70%. And then the other 30% we would request to come from ARPA. We do have Ryan Strickler on the call tonight if you have any questions for him. And I can go over any of the functionality if you'd like as well.
Thank you very much. This was reviewed in finance.
Mhm.
Ms. Mealy?
This was reviewed in finance. The discussion was, as one would expect, generally positive. Mr. Biter in particular felt very strongly about this software. Yeah, I think really the only question, and Ryan answered it relatively adequately, was the possibility. This is not a fixed amount that we are paying on an annual basis. Obviously, the city is not negotiated like a 5-year fixed payment. It is entirely possible that the cost of these services will increase on an annual basis. According to Ryan, I believe the amount, generally speaking, falls in the 2 to 4% number. Which I believe this is not currently built into our budget, correct, Tracy? Because we didn't have these numbers? Or is it in this latest copy and I simply didn't spot it?
Because it's funded by
Oh, it's funded by
DCED and
DCED
ARPA.
this time. It will be built in 20. Sorry, I'm out of the mindset I was in on Tuesday. I apologize. But consequently, we would be wanting to build that 3% higher number, presumably in the 2024 budget. The one thing that I did request of the administration for both of these items, we didn't do it this week, but I would be interested in possibly doing it next. I would prefer to see this funded instead of with ARPA funds for the initial, the 30% that falls to the city on both of these items. It seems to me it should be coming out of the city's budget and not out of ARPA. It's a minor matter. It's not a hill to die on, but it would seem to me that we should do that so that we begin to absorb the cost of the software in the city's actual budget.
What was the total cost?
For implementation, just for pay time, it was $3,500 and then annually $28,000.
$3,500.
Yes, just for implementation, just for the first year.
So it's about $8,000 or $9,000 for this particular item.
I would generally agree. I think, outside of some leftover, a substantial amount of recreation money that we have. I know this is a drop in the bucket, but aside from public works, reserve money and not public works.
There's one more cup of coffee back there, Adam.
I'm gonna go get it here in a
Wait, there's
minute.
a cup of coffee somewhere?
Yeah, I'll grab the other one for you. Recreation, that's what I was looking for. I think that we've pretty much allocated and are expecting everything to proceed, at least initially, as forward. So, I would prefer to see it in the general fund also. I'm happy to approve this with that expectation. We make that change next week in the general fund. I don't want to see this kind of stuff be funded from ARPA. I'm comfortable with what we have left in recreation, what we have left in public works, and I'd like to leave it that way.
I think part of my point is just that this will be an ongoing annual
Correct.
expense. And so we should begin
Agreed.
to absorb it within the budget in the year that we begin doing.
I agree.
Right. Now, the implementation, I understand ongoing annual
Yeah.
expense, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And it's much, much higher for the second set of software than,
Well,
right, the
yeah.
implementation cost. Right.
I think the same argument is applicable to the second one. I know that's higher, and moving forward with, I know we've heard antiquated systems 2 or 3 times tonight, and again, I get it. We need to do this, and it's unfortunate. I know we're getting match money, but this is pretty important stuff. We should have been doing this a couple of years ago, but better late than never. I would rather see it out of the general fund also.
So to clarify, the costs would go through IT, which is in City Hall operating, and then be allocated to the general fund through the allocation.
If I remember, I think there's a surplus in City Hall operating anyway.
Tracy says, and that's gonna be a real pain in the butt for next week.
Yeah, I know, this will be interesting, but, no, so that, just so you know, you won't see that cost increase general fund in one spot. It goes into IT and then be out.
The surplus in this year's general fund, or in this year's city hall operating, right? I think there's a general surplus
Gotcha.
in the city hall fund, but there's not
Yeah.
a surplus shown in this year's.
I thought there was,
Right.
sorry. Anyway. Neither here nor there. Any other comments or questions?
I do have one.
Yes, Mr. Biter.
One of the benefits of this system, this is more for the administration itself, department heads specifically. One of the benefits of this system is allowing employees to clock in using their phones, so they can keep better track, you can get more accurate time, but making sure that they are at location when they're clocking in and not on the highway because they're running late for whatever particular reason, or they're not clocking out after they've already driven down the road a few miles, things like that. Not trying to accuse anybody of trying to steal, but things can start to become a bit of a habit. What process are we going to have in place to make sure that we are getting the correct hours from our employees?
This system has a process called geofencing. So where we say where they work, we specify that, and then they can only punch in or out within a certain proximity of that location.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Biter. Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Biter,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. We'll move to item 13, Mrs. Frank.
Resolution accepting a contract with the S&A software for online financial management services.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Nice. Cheers. Motion and a second. Go ahead, sorry.
So again, after looking at a number of accounting packages, we focused in on what's called BS&A. It's used by a number of Pennsylvania municipalities. It's beautiful. It almost made me cry. So it has the ability to do all paperless workflow. It also has the ability to assign specific users specific duties, so that, for instance, if an invoice is for the police department, it will route to the police department's assigned users for approvals before it even gets to the finance department to be put through the system. It will allow them to put triggers on so that when they meet a certain percentage of their budget, it will trigger them so that they're monitoring more closely. They will have real-time access to their information. It also has the ability to public face so that it can be made accessible to the public when that time comes after it's set up. There is the ability to do dashboards so that you know where you are in terms of budget, in terms of year-to-date, in terms of even your workflows. So we're proposing that we purchase this product. The implementation fees are $137,000 with a $54,000 annual service fee. Once again, DCED will cover 70% of that cost, and the city will be responsible for 30%. I will say that it will be a year until this software is ready to be installed in our system.
This was also reviewed in finance.
This was reviewed in finance, and I think once again, with the general positivity by the members of finance, we clearly need a new software system within the finance department, and obviously Tracy feels it has support needs. There were a couple of questions that I actually thought that I'd resolved in the course of the finance meeting, but now Molly, you sent me a follow-up email that made it slightly more confusing. A reply from a gentleman named Dan about an annual service fee, and he says the annual service fee is listed with Exhibit B at $79,000 annually. And I don't see any number like that. And, and I'm not sure what that means.
We might need to clarify. We had originally asked him for a proposal that included the HR and payroll modules, so he might have gone back when he
Okay.
answered that question.
I
to
was
the-
wondering
to
if it
an
was
incorrect.
typographed where on his
Yeah,
part,
we'll
because it
clarify.
seems to say within the contract that customer service is included in the annual fee. It seems to be indicating in Exhibit B that the annual fee is, well, it looks like it should be about 53, although in one place it says 47, in another place it says 53. But nowhere does it say 79. And
I'll
so-
clarify with him that he may
okay.
have looked at the no proposal.
Okay, got it. And then the refer back. There are no additional fees. My primary concern. So this particular contract is locked into an increase rate of not more than the consumer product pricing index, yes. Which is reassuring, I suppose. That lets us know more or less what to expect on an annual basis. While we're likely to see increases, they won't be exponential for any reason. But this is obviously the costlier of the two softwares, and there will be no fees over and above those that we are currently building in, is my understanding.
Correct. And even
Unless we add other
many of the
modules.
other softwares, every user was an additional charge. So I made very clear, I wanted to be very clear with him that we had unlimited users for access, and that's included in that.
Great. Okay. It looks as though the software meets our needs and potentially exceeds it. The other question, what is built? So you said that we nixed some HR modules and some other elements of the software, at least for the time being.
Correct. The initial proposal included both payroll and HR, but we found their HR product wasn't as robust, and the cost was much more expensive than going with Paytime.
Okay.
Like it was probably 2 or 3 times more expensive to get the HR and payroll module within BSNA than it was just to go with Paytime. Paytime will give us a download so that will upload right into the software. So it's a pretty seamless process in terms of getting the data into the accounting package.
Got it. Oh, excellent. Okay. So then I build a development module, which what was the logic behind that?
We did not. I think it's on we decided not to purchase that at this time, but it's on.
Oh, well, but it's also included in the annual fee that's in the resolution.
I think maybe we talked about implementing it later, but not initially.
Well, I guess the thing is we're paying for it according to the exhibits. If I'm reading everything accurately.
So I think what we did was we had told him that to include it, and we're not paying for it now. We're going to pay for it in a year, and then that'll be part of the system at that time.
Okay, sorry. So then just to clarify, the 53,000, so we are approving a resolution with 137,000 implementation fees and $53,895 in annual service fees. To get to that 53,000, according to the exhibits, we would appear to be paying for those modules this year. Admittedly, only 30% of those modules, but.
I'm sorry, I was looking at this.
I said to get to the $53,000 number in the resolution.
Yes.
It would seem as though, reading their exhibits, that we are paying for those modules this year. Only 30% of the modules, because of course DCD is paying.
Right, once we implement, right? But
Okay.
yes,
So-
that is correct. We'll pay for it once we actually get
Implement
the
it. So
software,
that will
yes.
be on a different annual schedule. Right?
The entire
Sorry.
package.
I'm just trying to
I'm just
understand.
clarifying the entire, we're asking you to authorize this because that starts the process, but they're telling us it will be a year till they can come in and implement the software.
Okay.
So what we're
all
saying
of this will be implemented within a year. Got it. Okay. I apologize. I thought you were telling me that you were rolling out building department and community development modules after the rest of the software. 53,000. I think that was, anyway, other than that, the software looks good. The contract looked acceptable, and we brought it to you thinking that it was a good idea.
Any other comments or questions from other members of council? I mean, again, I would agree, same thing here. I'd rather see this out of the general fund. It's gonna be long-term anyway, but, yeah, we can make those changes next week.
And I'll have you from him once you approve this as to what his timing is and whether that is 23 or 24.
Thank you very much.
Certainly.
Better late than never. Any other comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 14, Mrs. Frank. Thank you both very much.
Resolution authorizing a purchase of the 2021 Ford F-550 truck.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Our most patient director, Mr. Livermore. Good evening, sir.
What did they say, best for last?
Something like that. Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, what I present to you tonight is a resolution to purchase a 2021 F-550 plow truck, pretty much. This truck will be financed through Jersey Shore State Bank at $98,000, and we will have 5 annual payments at $21,114.95 a year. This will be paid out of the liquid fuels. This truck will be purchased through Maxwell Truck Equipment, which is out of State College. They are a CoStar's dealer. This truck will also be outfitted with a 10-foot plow and a spreader on it. It is a used truck, but it only has around 10,000 miles on it, so it's pretty much new. The perks of found this truck, obviously, I don't have to wait a year and a half and save about $30,000 for a new one. So I can, as soon as we get approval, I can make the move and hopefully have it before Christmas. This truck will be replacing a 20-year-old truck, which is GMC 2002, which will be put on Penn bid, I believe. This was reviewed by Austin, and it went through Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Livermore. This did go to Public Works, Mrs. Katz?
Yes, it did. Scott did a very good job of getting this. Found it hard to believe that this city gave up their truck after 10,000 miles, because they usually get how many thousands of miles? A lot.
Yeah, I think the company that got it, they usually get a few, the demo trucks, they'll use them for a little bit and then sell it. And I just happened to meet up with a guy, and I said, "You got any trucks?" He's like, "Yeah, I have one in the parking lot." So it all worked out.
You met a guy. I love it. But it's a truck that's much needed, and like you said, you're putting our old truck up at Penn bit, and we'll see what kind of money we get off of that.
Yeah, I mean,
But
it helps. Yep.
you can pick this up as soon as this is passed, then, right?
Yeah, within the next couple weeks. I gotta finish
With the next couple
paperwork,
weeks,
yeah, yeah.
and with
Hopefully
all the
before Christmas, I'll have it, yep.
with all the equipment,
Yep, it's
especially
already outfitted,
if that
ready to go.
snowboard comes down,
What?
you may need. some
I
guy-
didn't hear any of that. I didn't hear any of that, no.
Okay, but yes, and it was a good discussion on the truck.
Thank you, Mrs. Katz. Any comments or questions from other members of council? Okay. Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much, Scott. I think, did I miss anything? I don't think I missed anything voting wise or resolution ordinance wise. Perfect. Item 20, except for filing, we have our public safety meeting minutes from August 10th and September 14th, 2022. Our ERC meeting minutes from August 11th, excuse me, August 31st and October 26th, 2022, and our water authority minutes from September 28th and October 26th, 2022. Is there a motion in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion in a second. Any comments or questions related to the minutes we're filing? Hearing seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi.
Yes.
Mr. Bider.
Yes.
Ms. Mealy.
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 21, announcements. Our next city council meeting is actually a week from today, Thursday, December 15th, right here at 7 PM. It is our last meeting of the calendar year, barring some emergency or anything like that happening. Upcoming meetings, Tuesday, December 13th, 1 PM is Finance, 2:30 PM Public Works. December 10 AM is our ERC Committee. 11:30 AM Public Safety, and also at 11:30 AM is our Redevelopment Authority. Thursday, December 15th at 7 PM is our next and final city council meeting of the year. Are there any comments from members of council? I would just like to say to all other 6 of my colleagues, I think this will be the last time we're all here together in person for the year. And I just want to thank all 6 of you for a fun job and a good job throughout the year, and the work we did tonight with the dialogue, budget changes, et cetera. And wishing you all safe travels and a happy, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Just thank you all very much. It's a privilege to serve with you.
Thank you as well, Adam.
Thank you.
Any other comments from members of council? Any comments from the administration? Any comments from the public? Any comments from the news media, none of which are here? Okay. I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion or meeting adjourned. Have a good evening.